I come from a show business family. My mom and dad were actually in vaudeville as a dance team, and then they went into what they called tab shows, and then they started doing some acting, but they always were a dance team the whole time. And then we settled kind of in Green Bay, Wisconsin, and they got into radio more. And they had my older brother and sister when they were on the road with vaudeville. And then there was 9 years of no children because it was, you know, very hard traveling with all that. So they got settled in Green Bay in radio, and they started a second family. And my sister and my brother and myself were all born in their 40s, you know. But they had their own show. So we moved down to, I was born actually in Beaver Dam, Wisconsin, and they had their show there. Well, they mainly traveled through the Midwest. They never really did New York or LA. I mean, they went out to LA in the 30s, because my mother actually went to the Pasadena Playhouse in the 30s. But they were mainly based in through the Midwest, and they traveled around to little small towns. And when we settled in Beaver Dam, it was farmers, it was farm country. And I mean, I actually remember people bringing a bushel of corn to get into the show. I mean, there was a barter system going on, not with everybody, but there was to some extent. And they would put on a play. My mother would take a play, rewrite it a little bit so they didn't have to pay royalties, and they would do a play. And then when the play was over, they'd take the chairs up, and my dad played drums, and he had a little band, and my oldest sister, who's going to be 94 next month, would sing, was a singer with the band. So, but I started, I was like 3. I mean, I can remember doing a dance recital, and my brother and my sister were doing this little dance, and I was playing Cupid. I was supposed to go out and shoot an arrow so they would fall in love. Well, when I went out and shot the arrow, there were nuns all in, it was a Catholic school, and there were all nuns in the first row, and they all started applauding and cheering, and I thought that was great. So I just kept bowing, and you know, and my mom's trying, come, get off stage, and I wouldn't get off stage because I thought, oh, they're applauding for me. I'm going to stay out. So then we moved to LA when I was 7, and that's when my brother and I got into doing some TV and stage work in LA. My late husband, James Best, was an actor, went under contract to Universal in 1949. He had gotten started overseas during the war, and he went to see a show. This girl had invited him, and he said, "No, I don't want to go to the show. I just want to take you out." And she said, "No, I'm not going to go out with you unless you come see the show." So he came to the show, and he said the curtain opened, and it was magic. He said, "What? This is incredible." He had never seen a show. He was from a little town, southern Indiana, and he went backstage, and there were GIs changing out of costumes into uniforms. And Jimmy was an MP at the time, and he was cleaning up werewolf gangs in Wiesbaden, Germany. And he said, these guys are here with all these pretty girls, and I'm out getting shot at every night. So he went and he auditioned, never did anything in his life, totally faked the audition, and he got in the company. And he started touring with, they were doing My Sister Eileen, and Arthur Penn was the director, who later directed Jimmy in Left-Handed Gun with Paul Newman. And so he stayed longer. He was due to get out, and he stayed longer so that he could travel and get more experience. And Arthur Penn told him, when you get out, you need to go to New York. And that's what Jimmy did. He worked his way in. He was doing summer stock, winter stock, and someone at this little hotel that he was staying at knew the Goldsteins. I think it's Goldstein. They were brothers, Bob and, can't think of the brother's name, but they were the Goldsteins at Universal. And they gave him Jimmy's photos, and they called him in and offered him a contract at Universal. So he went out to Universal, went under contract in 1949. Steve Ladshaw, who's very involved in the Lone Pine Film Festival, longtime friend, and talked for years to Jimmy about, we need to do a sequel to The Killer Shrews. And finally, after several writings of scripts, they decided that they were going to go ahead and do it. And I think we did it in 2011. I think we shot it out in LA, and we shot out at a ranch in Santa Clarita, and it's called Return of the Killer Shrews. And Jimmy plays the same character 50 years later that he did in Killer Shrews. You know, what we did is there's places in the film where Jimmy's reminiscing about Killer Shrews, and we used footage from the original as with his voiceover. So it's quite interesting. He has a wonderful monologue sitting at the bar talking about it, and he gets quite emotional in the monologue, and it's really, I mean, he was such a good actor, such an incredible actor, and it's just a wonderful moment to see this actor 50 years later with footage of him and him doing a monologue about it. It's really neat. People that don't know the movie won't know what we're talking about, but you know, Jimmy had no idea that Killer Shrews had become a cult science fiction film. He had no idea. And then when we met Steve, we were living in Florida, and he started talking about it. He said, no, it's like a top B horror movie. Jimmy's like, oh my God, because he was always kind of like, you know, every actor has a skeleton in the closet role, and that was sort of his. And he had no idea. And so when he saw what was all happening with that, he sort of embraced it and went, yeah, let's go for it, let's do it. In the original, it's dogs with rugs on them and, you know, but yeah, we did CGI. And we did it campy. It's not, the new film is not meant to be looked at as a modern day horror movie. It's not. We did it as tongue-in-cheek to talk about these B movies that were made in the late 50s that Hollywood was built on, you know, these little cheapy B movies. So some people didn't get it when we brought it out. They thought, oh my God, you know, what's with, because the CGI is kind of cheesy, but we did it on purpose. Just keep that in mind. It wasn't bad filmmaking. We did it as a spoof on the original. Yeah, the end, Burt Reynolds' film. Burt and Jimmy were very close, been friends go way back to right before Burt went on Gunsmoke. They were friends right away, and they remained friends Jimmy's whole life. And Jimmy was living in Jackson, Mississippi for 7 years. He kind of got out of, he was coming back and shooting films and all, but he actually was based in Jackson, Mississippi, because Jimmy never cared for Los Angeles. It was not his place to live. So he was living there, and unfortunately, or fortunately for me, Jimmy and his wife, who's a wonderful lady, mother of his 2 girls, my step-girls, got divorced. And he was kind of a little lost, and Burt said, hey, I'm going to do the end. I want you to come out and be associate producer on the end. So Jimmy's actually associate producer on the film. But Jimmy's no dummy. He knows if he wrote in a small part for himself, he'd have residuals on this film, whereas he didn't as associate producer. So he wrote in this scene in the hospitals that has become like just a classic scene.
Can you describe it?
Yeah, well, Jimmy's, Burt thinks he's dying of this disorder, and he needs to make a phone call in the hospital. And Jimmy's on the phone, and his head is all wrapped up in bandages, and he's got the gown on and all and everything. And he's talking supposedly to his girlfriend on the phone, saying, yeah, they won't let me out of here, you know, oh, but talk lovey-dovey to me, you know, and, oh, that's it, like, you know, that Jimmy could do. And Burt's in the background trying to get him off the phone, and he keeps saying, I have to make a call. And Jimmy is like, get out of here, I'm on the phone, you know. So it's a very, very funny scene. And the climax of the scene is hysterical, because what Burt does, he reaches up and he turns off Jimmy's IV. And of course, Jimmy went into, like, immediately. and
I've got to make a very important call.
Well, I think, yeah, he gets his pacemaker tomorrow or something was one of the lines. So he shuts off the IV and he starts like, you know, acting really crazy, and he starts going down the hall, and of course Bert's on the phone actually talking about the next scene that's going to happen in the movie, but no one cares about what Burt Reynolds is saying because Jimmy is totally crazy in the background, bouncing off the wall, and he finally bounces off the wall and slides down the wall, you know, and a nurse comes running over because she thought that he was actually collapsing in the scene. So it's very funny, but no one knows at all what Burt is saying through that phone conversation. Yeah, and Burt loved it. Burt was like, do it, you know. He is the hero. First off, Shenandoah is, in my opinion, is one of the best movies ever made. And, you know, Jimmy did 5 movies with thank you, with Jimmy Stewart. But I think of the 5, Shenandoah was Jimmy's favorite. He loved working with Jimmy Stewart. And it's such a beautiful film. And I have shown that film to young people, and it holds up. That film holds up. It's beautifully shot. It's gorgeous. So he plays a rebel soldier who helps the little boy who's in the prison camp with him, and he sort of protects him. Jimmy Stewart's son who gets captured and put in a prison, and Jimmy sort of takes him under his wing and helps him and all, and they're going to escape, and he escapes with him, you know. So he is the hero because he saves the little boy so he can go back home. Another Jimmy Stewart film, Henry Fonda's in that movie too. I mean, Jimmy Stewart and Henry Fonda in the same Western is pretty incredible. And Jimmy Stewart's the sheriff in town, and Henry Fonda's gang comes in. Jimmy's one of the guys in the gang. And Gary Lockwood is like the young punk outlaw, you know, in it, and ends up accidentally shooting Jimmy, or Jimmy's character in the film. And so they have a wake. Everybody in the town is scared to death of this gang, and they do a wake in the town. So there's this big fire, and they prop up Jimmy in a rocking chair, and he's dead. And so, but you know, it took a long time to shoot, and it was out on the desert, so it was cold. But the fire was really hot, so from one side he said he was burning up, and the other side he was freezing, and he ended up getting pneumonia after the film from shooting that. Little things that he did almost in every movie. Yeah, gestures, but he loved to play, even though he played some really bad villains, he always tried to give them a little bit of a good quality about them. Like, he'll be sitting, I'm not sure of the movie, it might be Kansas Raiders, and there's a child, and he's actually talking with the child, playing with the child, but he's also playing with a gun while he's talking to this child. But he always tried to find something good in each character, so, you know, like talking with a child, even though he's an outlaw and a villain and all that. And he always did this little laugh thing that he would do. So but he always played them very edgy. I mean, he may laugh 1 minute, and then that jaw would start tightening that he would use a lot right before he's going to blow someone away in the movie. So he developed a lot of interesting things as an actor. When I was little and I lived in Wisconsin, my grandmother lived in Dayton, Ohio. So in those days, you took the train and you went through Chicago. It's the first place I ever got on an escalator, was in Chicago, and I'm about 4. And so, but the trains were wonderful. Linen tablecloths and china, and, you know, really beautiful. Well, Jimmy kind of came in a little bit on that and did some cross-country train things. When he came from New York to LA, he came by train across country. So for some reason, we both sort of had this kind of romantic idea about what it was to travel by train. And we had a wedding anniversary coming up. And a dear friend of mine, a Broadway actress, Linda Hart, and Tom Wopat, from Dukes of Hazzard were doing a show together called Catch Me If You Can in New York. So we thought for our anniversary, we're going to take the train up to New York City, and that'll be just so to travel by train again. Well, it was awful. We had this compartment that you could barely move. They took our luggage and put it somewhere else because you couldn't get the luggage in with the room. And we sat across from each other. We actually were touching knees. That's it. And there were like bunk beds over here. I mean, yeah, really fun trip, right? So we go to the dining car. We're like, oh, well, we'll go to the dining car and have dinner. Paper plates, plastic forks, no tablecloth. So we were like, oh my God, and now we got to come home this way too. So Dukes of Hazzard is a Americana series that was started in 1979. They started shooting in 78. And it's kind of a spin-off. Guy Waldron, who was the creator, writer, wrote a film called Moonrunners. Moonrunners? I think it's Moonrunners. And a little low-budget film. And some of those characters that end up in Dukes of Hazzard are actually in that movie. And it's kind of a corrupt little southern town. And there's a boss in the town that in the series is played Boss Hogg, and it's played by Sorrel Book, a fine character actor. And Denver Pyle, who Jimmy had done tons of movies with, actually was killed in Left-Handed Gun by Denver Pyle up on the hill. And he's the uncle, and he has these two boys and a girl, and they're the Dukes. Their last name is Duke. Jimmy is the sheriff in town, who in the beginning was a good sheriff, but something messes up with his pension or whatever. So the concept is he kind of turns bad with Boss Hogg doing all these schemes, right? But Jimmy knew it was going to be a family show, so he really didn't want if you watch the first couple of shows, they're very different than what Dukes of Hazzard ended up being. It was far more serious, but Jimmy realized early on that they had a family show if they just played it that way. So the whole concept after the first 5 episodes really changes more to a family type show. And so Jimmy played Roscoe P. Coltrane more or less like a 13-year-old. And he just is playing. He thinks everything is really fun, chasing the boys in the car and all that. And so everybody loved Roscoe. Everybody loved Roscoe, even though he's really a villain in the show. He never played it that way. So it became a great character. And then like in the 2nd or 3rd season, he wanted a dog in the show. And they were like, no, we don't want to pay a trainer. And Jimmy was like, look, the scripts are all the same. It's getting boring. You can always cut to the dog doing something, and it'll be great. So Flash arrived from the pound, a basset hound. And so then he, who became another star of the show, Flash. And you can always cut to him when the editor is like, oh, well, this scene's getting boring, cut to the dog. Everybody loves it, So it became a very, very popular show. Everybody was good. They had 2 handsome boys. They had Catherine Bach, beautiful lady. Denver Pyle, who played the patriarch of the family. You had Sorrel Book playing the villain in town and getting everybody in trouble. And you had Jimmy playing a 13-year-old sheriff with a dog, having a good time. Every actor was perfect. It just was one of those shows that just came together and meshed and ran for 7 years. When Dukes of Hazzard went off the air in '85, it kind of went a little dormant for a few years. And then in the 90s, they brought it back in reruns. And Dukes just exploded in the 90s. I almost think that through the 90s and on into even now it's not on the air because of political situations, but when it came back on the air in the 90s and in the 2000s, I actually think it was probably more popular. And Ben Jones, who played Cooter on the show, and after the show was over, actually was a congressman for 2 terms, and from Georgia. he saw the writing on the wall that there was life after Dukes going off the air like that. And he started Cooter's Place. And he started with it up in Virginia in Sperryville, a little store. Had Dukes of Hazzard toys, few things, you know, sold jams and jellies along the road. He called us and he said, "You think Jimmy would come up and do an appearance at my store?" And we're like, "Well, yeah, for you, of course we could come up." So we went up. I think it's 2001 or possibly, no, I think it's 2000 maybe. It's somewhere right in there, beginning of the 2000s. And so Jimmy's like, "Yeah, I'll go up and do an appearance at your little store. It's great. You know, it'll be fun. Get to see you." And Ben was married to, had been married to Alma, and she was great. I loved Alma. And so we went up, and Ben didn't say too much about it. So we're driving to the store the next morning. And he keeps seeing all these cars parked along the road. And now, this is a little tiny town, Sperryville. In fact, my neighbors in North Carolina texted me today. They're at Hazard Fest in Tennessee. And Tom Wopat's there, Rick Hurst is there, some of the stunt guys are there, and I'm here. And I'm like, yeah, I've done that fest, but I'm in Lone Pine today. That started in 2001. There's been so many. I mean, we did one in 2007 in Nashville at the fairgrounds. The fire department closed it down because there were too many people at a fairgrounds. There were probably 20,000 people there. So they had to close down some of the buildings and let other people leave and let more people in and all. It's phenomenon. And it's been that way for several years. But then, however you want to look at it, politically it became a little bit of a problem because there's a rebel flag on the car. And what is sad about it is that it was playing on CMT for years and doing very well, top rated show. And the Family Channel, I don't know, does the Family Channel still exist? Not Family Channel, TV Land. TV Land bought the rights to start showing Dukes of Hazzard. Well, TV Land aired one, and unfortunately there was an incident with a young man, very sad situation, terrible situation, and TV Land took it off the air. And it's never come back on. You can, see it on Amazon Prime, it's all out in DVDs and all that, but it's never been able to be aired again. I don't think the only time Carol O'Connor and Jimmy worked together is in the Heat of the Night episode that Jimmy did, I think in 92 or 93, something like that. But prior to that, he was doing Archie Bunker Place. And it was an episode, and I'm in it. It's an episode where Archie's going to have a singles night or something. We're talking because Dukes is still on the air. It must be about 85 or 86. And so he's having a singles night at the bar, and I'm in that scene. And he was sort of my hero for that day, because coming from a show business family and working off and on and doing a lot of theater my whole life, I've always had a very strong professional attitude of anything I do, stage, film, industry, anyway, it's totally professional. And that's why Jimmy and I hit it off so well, because he had the same ethics about it. And I'm doing this scene, and the actor that I'm working with kind of started to believe the script a little too much. And I keep saying, hey, let's just cool it. Let's save that for when the camera's rolling, and so I guess Carol O'Connor witnessed it or something. And I kind of looked over at him one time, and we had talked before, so he knew that Jimmy and I were together and all that sort of thing, and we had a good conversation about Jimmy and how great an actor he thought he was. So I don't know, I looked over one time and I saw Carol O'Connor kind of look like, what the heck's going on over there? It was a real shift in his attitude. So I guess he witnessed what was happening, and he actually walked over and he said to the young man, if you don't straighten up and start acting in a professional manner, I will have you kicked off my set. And boy, I never had any more trouble at all. But so that's my story of Carol O'Connor. And then Jimmy did In the Heat of the Night with with Carol O'Connor, a great episode. They have a wonderful scene together and all. So General Electric Theater was a dramatic show that Ronald Reagan hosted. Yeah, and it was about a family adopting a little girl or something like that. And I wasn't the little girl, that was a different girl. But I came over to play with her or something. We had a couple of scenes, you know, together. The Frank Sinatra is doing High Hopes on a TV special. Yeah, yeah. I worked a whole week on that. That was really, and he was great to us. He had a huge room for all the kids, because there were probably, I don't know, 20, 25 kids doing High Hopes. We got high hopes. So we were doing that, and he had this beautiful room. Everybody had their own, like a cot, because you know there's child labor laws. You have to have so much rest and so much school and all that. It was like top notch, I want to tell you. Everybody had their own little cot, and we were treated great. But Frank Sinatra made sure that we were treated great. So that was fun. Actually, I kind of sat, I think, right above him or something, and there's one time where he kind of glances up at me in the tape. So Jimmy and I moved to Hickory in 2006, and from Florida. We'd been in Florida 20 years, tired of the heat, wanted to go to North Carolina, wanted to have seasons again. And Hickory is this little gem of a town. Well, it's not that little anymore, but it's a great town. It's an hour north of Charlotte. It's 45 minutes, you're up in the Blue Ridge Mountains. And it's just a great area of western North Carolina, beautiful. And when we started looking to move there, we saw that there was a community theater. Well, Jimmy and I both, even though Jimmy had a huge film career, was a real theater person. He loved doing theater. So we went to the Hickory Community Theater, and it was amazing, the productions they were doing. So as soon as we moved there, we started supporting it. We'd attend every show. We started helping out financially with the theater and all the community. And so they were doing a big capital campaign to do some restorations in the theater. We're in a building, because we're still in this building. It just had it's a building, it was the City Hall, and it was a building from 1921. And we're still in that building. And so now it's 102 years, but it seems like yesterday we had the celebration of the 100 year for the building. So they wanted to restore the theater, new drapes, new lights, bring it all up to date. And so Jimmy did his one-man show, which we had been traveling with for about the last 5 years of Jimmy's life. He got a little tired of autograph sessions, and he wanted to perform, you know, even though he was still doing films and things. So we created a one-man show, and we did them in a lot of theaters all through the South. And Jimmy would talk about his career, show film clips from different films and all, and then do autographs after it. And we did that all the time. So he did it at Hickory as a fundraiser. Place was packed. It's a little theater. It seats 319 people or whatever, but it's a beautiful historic theater, and it was a huge success. And then he told them that he wanted to do On Golden Pond. So we did On Golden Pond. I actually played his daughter, sorry to say, but we wanted to do a show together. I couldn't play the Katharine Hepburn role. So a wonderful actress who had been in Hollywood, oh God, what was her, oh, I can't say it, but she had been in Hollywood, and then she got married and moved back to Hickory. But you would know the name in a minute. But anyway, I'm sorry, it's not coming to me right now. But she did the play with Jimmy, and I played the daughter. Nobody complained, but anyway, I did. And that was in 2014. Jimmy was 87 years old, and he played that character on Golden Pond, and unfortunately passed away a year later. I know if you Google James Best, it's just page after page after page. And if you start counting all the TV, he probably did, I don't know, 30 or 40 Westerns, and then if you add in all the television shows, he told me at one time that sometimes he was working on 3 shows in 1 week. He'd work 2 days on, this Western, and then he'd go 2 days on another show, and then maybe Friday start of another show. He did all. I don't know of. There might be a couple of series, TV shows, that were in the late 50s, early 60s that he didn't do. But I mean, he did 3 Gunsmokes, 2 or 3 Bonanzas. He did all. Amazing career, amazing.
Even
Flipper.
3 Twilight Zones.
Jimmy is one of 3 actors that did 3 episodes of The Twilight Zone. Burgess Meredith did 4. He's the top. But Jimmy's one of 3, and I'm not sure who the other 2 are. Jimmy did The Last Rites of Jeff Myrtlebank, and they're all rural. And then he did The Grave, which is actually a Western with Lee Marvin and Lee Van Cleve and Strother Martin. Yeah, James Best, Strother Martin, Lee Van Cleve, Lee Marvin in 1 episode of Twilight Zone. It's called The Grave. And then he did one when the Twilight Zones went to an hour. He did one called Jezebel with Anne Francis and Carolyn Jones. Twilight Zone, of course, they're all over the place. You can see them on an airplane. I get residuals and it says air something or whatever for Twilight Zones. Well, we were talking about it this morning, and I can't say his name. He was with me signing this morning, and he wrote a book about all the Westerns, like 2,500 Westerns, and rates them. It's like the Cowboy Guide to Western Films or something. It's here at his book is for sale. I think his name is Jay something or James something. I'm sorry. It's terrible that I can't say his name. He was my partner this morning. We were signing, but he talked about Burgess Meredith loves to read, and he goes into the vault. He's a teller. He goes into the vault every day to read because his wife won't let him read at home. And he's in the vault, and there's a bomb explosion. He comes out of the vault, and the world's destroyed, and he's all alone. Well, he happens to find the library with all the books, and so here he can finally read all these amazing books that he was never able to read because the wife wouldn't let him at all. And the end of the show, he bends down to pick up a book, and his glasses drop and he steps on them. So here he is, the last person on earth probably, thinking he's going to read all these books, and he breaks his glasses. That's the Twilight Zone. My husband is so he has a Western following. He has a science fiction following for Forbidden Planet, he was in, and the Twilight Zones. Then he has the Dukes of Hazzard following. Then he has an Andy Griffith show following because he did 2 episodes of the Andy Griffith show, but it's a very popular character called the guitar player. And the first episode is in the first season. He's a guitar player in town, and they call him the Kid. Jimmy always played younger. He's like 35 in the episode, and they're calling him the Kid in the show. And so Andy Griffith, this band comes through, Bobby Fleet and the Band with a Beat, and Andy Griffith arrests them and put them in jail because he wants to force them to listen to Jimmy play the guitar. Well, of course, it's not Jimmy playing the guitar, but they hire him. And then he came back, I think the next season or the 3rd season, and he's been on the road, and and he comes back and he's broke, and all that sort of thing. But anyway, so he has a whole Andy Griffith following. So we used to do Mayberry Days. That's up in Mount Airy, North Carolina, all the time. Jimmy's in small roles, plays one of the crew. Got in trouble because he kept shooting his ray gun. They took it away from him because he was using batteries all the time. Yeah, but you know what it was? He took it. He was already doing, pretty good in films, but he took it because it was like 5 or 6 weeks work. Well, to an actor, back in the late 50s, to get 5-6 weeks work on a film, he was like, I'm in. So he played a crew member, and Leslie Nielsen's in it, and I think Anne Francis is in that film too. My stepdaughter. It's Jimmy's daughter. I have Jo Jamie, his oldest daughter, and then Janine. And we're very close, very close. Janine was a solid gold dancer in the early 80s, I guess. They were both dancers. Their mother was a dancer. And so she was a solid gold dancer. But I remember she came to us and she said, I know this isn't going to last forever. And I think I want to go to UCLA and take a creative writing class. And Jimmy thought that was great, because Jimmy was a writer too. You know, he was an artist, he was a writer, he was a director. I lived with this for 38 years, all this talent, right? But he was great. And so Janine became a writer. She married Michael Damian, who did Joseph and the Technicolor Cloak on Broadway, also was on Young and the Restless for 18 years. And they write, produce, and direct together. And they've done, oh gosh, I'm not even sure how many films they've done now. They've done a lot of films for Hallmark. Jimmy's last film is with them. It's called Sweeter Side of Life, and it was a Hallmark film. Jimmy's 87 in it, in the film. And Janine wrote it, Michael directed it, Janine produced it. So they're a powerhouse. And Janine, just in the last 2 years, has started directing. And she directed for Netflix Lindsay Lohan's comeback film. It was a Christmas film. And she has another one that she directed, Lindsay Lohan, called Irish Wish, that hasn't come out on Netflix yet. I think it comes out next spring. So, but they just go from one film to the other. They write, direct, so she's great. And Michael's a dream. You know, and my other daughter, Jo Jamie, is married and has wonderful two, well, they're not children anymore. So I have a great grandson. Yes. Yeah, well, Jimmy's great grandson, but no, it's great. They're, you know, Janine carried on in the business. I'm actually in it, in the bakery scene. Oh, I shouldn't say that because it wasn't union. But I play a Jersey woman in the bakery. You know, I'm very involved at the Hickory Community Theater. I've been a board member for 8 years. I finally just got off the board, but they're already talking about me coming back on. So, but I love our theater. Our theater is great, and I'm telling you, we do amazing productions. I just closed in. I played my first character role because I never play my age, you know. So I did a role in A Gentleman's Guide to Love and Murder, a musical. And I played an old Cockney woman. I wore a gray wig and everything. Oh, of course, it's a theater. We do 11, 12 productions, I mean, a year. Well, it's a different medium, of course, you know, but my background was theater. I mean, I never was crazy about film, I mean, for myself. I mean, I did a few things and it was fine, but theater was my base. And so when we moved to North Carolina, I went back to doing theater at 63. And I've just finished my 16th show, you know. And like I said, this is the first time I've played an old lady. Up until now, you know, I play women lots of times 50, 55 years old, and I'm 75, you know. But I'm just lucky that I can do that. I know some people here are going, wait a minute, you were with James for 38 years? I'm like, yeah. Well, I'm just, you know, my whole family is this way. So I'm just really lucky. We just celebrated last Sunday my brother's 90th birthday. And I told you earlier, my sister's going to be 94. And so all 5 siblings are alive and well. Oh, I love my first time here. And you know what's weird about that? We had a trailer in Keogh Hot Springs in Bishop for about 3 years, in between Jimmy doing Hooper and before he got Dukes. And we would come up, we loved to fish. Jimmy was a huge fisherman, and I loved to fish too. So we would fish Owens River and all that, you know, and up someone mentioned June Lake today. We used to fish up there all the time. Well, what brought us, you know, Jimmy was really dear friends with stuntman Stan Barrett. He was best man at our wedding. He's great. He lives in Idaho now. But he lived up in Mammoth. And that's what kind of brought us up this way. And we had this little vacation place, but it was mainly to go fishing, you know, and all. But we must have passed Lone Pine every time. Did Jimmy ever say, "Oh, there's Lone Pine where I..." No.
I love this.
And that was Jimmy, you know. Steve wanted to show him some locations out in Chatsworth, and Jimmy was like, "Why do I want to go there? I did it. I saw it. I've lived it. I don't need to see it." So which Steve and I always laugh, because I'm going to hike up tomorrow to the opening in the Alabama Hills, of the opening of Ride Lonesome, where Jimmy's sitting against the rocks. Now, I've seen this movie for years, but I'm actually going to visit the location. I've never been to the location. So I'm actually going to see it tomorrow. But I know I'm going to hear in my ear, "Why in the hell did you hike all the way up here to look at some location?" Because that was Jimmy. He just went from one thing to the next, never looked back. And, you know, people had to tell him sometimes films that he did. A friend came over to the house one time and said, "You know, you worked with Bruce Lee." Jimmy said, "Oh, I worked with Bruce Lee?" He said, "Well, you did a Green Hornet, right?" And Jimmy said, "Yeah, I did a Green Hornet." And he said, "Well, Bruce Lee played Kato." He said, "Oh, that was Bruce Lee?" I mean, but that was Jimmy. It was never, yes, he was proud of his, what he did, but Jimmy was always looking forward to what he was going to do next. That's what was important. So he will definitely be laughing that I'm hiking up to this location site to see where he shot this opening. Oh, I think the Lone Pine Film Festival is fabulous. I mean, I did some other Western film festivals, and they're all fun to go to. But here, it's very unique because you have the actual locations that people can visit, and you have this gorgeous museum. I mean, this is a fabulous museum of Western film history. And so Lone Pine, in my book now, is the #1 festival in the country because it has that. You know, I mean, you're not going to get that anyplace else. You're going to get films and meet actors and all, but here to actually be able to visit sites and see this wonderful museum, it's a fabulous place.